Hi everyone, Melissa Gross here. Today I'm going to share with you one of our chronological albums. I'm going to be sharing Volume 1 of the year 2007. If you have not read my blog post before watching this video, I highly recommend that. I'll be talking about how I have combined my Library of Memories system with some of the tips that Shamel shares in her cover-to-cover class. So the blog post will just give you a little background on what I'm doing here. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will put a link to that blog post underneath the video. So you'll see here that I have two volumes. Both of these are for 2007 because I scrapped a lot of photos and a lot of stories for that year. Today we're going to be looking at Volume 1. Okay, you can see here the first page in my album is an 8x8 page, and you'll notice as we go along that I create different size layouts and use different types of page protectors. I just incorporate them all in the same album. So I originally put all the layouts that I had created. The layouts for 2007 were created between probably the years 2008 and I finished up last year in 2012. The first layout that I had for this year was actually this layout here, which is a layout with no photos. It tells the story of something that we did that entire year. Robbie and I actually read the Bible to each other. We took turns reading it out loud that year, and I wanted that to go at the beginning of the album because it was something that really affected our entire year. As we go through the album, you'll see that this was also a year of travel. So not only did we read the Bible out loud to each other when we were at home, we often read it on the telephone or over Skype, and occasionally had to read it individually because we were in two different time zones and sometimes two different days. Because I had this first, I had just one 8x8, and so I created a little bit of a title page as an 8x8 to go on the back of that. I just took a couple of square punched photos from my square punch drawers, which is part of my Library of Memories system, and just made a quick and easy title page. But I also realized that I had not scrapped the story of the beginning of the year. We actually celebrated New Year's in Canada, and for those of you who don't know, we actually live in Texas. So we celebrated our 5th anniversary in Canada, so I wanted to document that that's where we were when the year started. So I created this layout several months ago so that I would, we're not kind of skipping over that section of time. Now the next layout, I actually have a 2-page layout next, and I'm going to skip over that layout because it's of a wedding reception, my nephew's wedding reception, and that marriage has unfortunately since ended in divorce, and so out of respect for them, I'm just going to skip that, not put that on the video there. So then we come to the beginning of that year. I actually had 2 jobs that year, and this layout documents the job that I had for the Association for Business Communicators, and these photos were taken at different times over the 3.5 months that I had this job. So this is a connections layout, connecting those time periods, just telling about that job. As part of that job, I traveled with one of the professors to New York. This documents the flowers that Robbie sent to me in New York. He always sends me flowers when we are not together or traveling separately. After that, I have a 2-page spread also from that New York trip. This is the Toys R Us store in New York. This is the first time I had ever been in the Toys R Us store in New York. This was based on a sketch, I believe, from the Sketch Support blog. It's also been a couple of years since I created it. You'll notice this is a 2-page layout, and there's this gap here because of the rings. I know that bothers some people. It doesn't bother me at all. Some people sew their page protectors together, but I'm fine with them being like this. After we both returned home, very shortly after that, we took a trip down to visit my parents who lived at that time 3 hours away, and we brought my dad a birthday gift. It was his very first MP3 player. You can see his sense of humor as he has the gift bag on his head, but he has truly enjoyed that MP3 player over the last several years. This was a layout that I created also this past fall because I realized it was a story that was missing from 2007. I had already scrapped this layout from that same trip about my niece's 2nd birthday. And you can see, well, you probably can't see in the picture, but their gifts are from Canada and New York because that's where we had recently been. That same trip we also visited with Robbie's mom, who was in a Mardi Gras parade, and this layout was inspired by a challenge blog. The challenge was to use as many eyelets as you could on a layout, so I used lots of different eyelets on this layout. Had a lot of fun doing that. We were back home for a while, and my niece, who is now grown, came up to visit me. This was her senior year of high school, and she was visiting with us, and she locked her keys in her car, which was kind of a funny incident, and I had actually kept the receipt where we paid a locksmith to come and unlock the car, so I kept that piece of memorabilia. I love using memorabilia when I can on my layouts. This layout was inspired by a challenge on Chamel's blog sometime last year. Another story that I had not told, we have several layouts coming up that are photos of Robbie and I in Nashville. And I realized going through my layouts that I had not told why we were in Nashville. So this layout does that. I knew that I had an 8.5 by 11 here, so I went ahead and created this as an 8.5 by 11. This is the story of why we were in Nashville. I had written a paper and it was going to be published, and I was presenting it at a professional conference. Now you may recognize this photo because it was right back here on this layout also. So you can see that I don't have any problem using the same photo twice if I can use that to tell the story. Next layout, at that time in 2007 we were still using film photography, so this was not exactly the best picture, obviously the backlighting, but I just thought it was kind of a neat silhouette. And this layout was actually based on a sketch also. And let me just remind you that these layouts, a lot of these were created in, probably the majority of them in 2010 and 2011, so I can't remember exactly where each inspiration came from, and that's okay because it doesn't really matter to me as long as I've got my photos and my stories scrapped. Another 2-page layout. This one was actually based on a sketch in the Big Picture Classes Double Take workshop, I think in 2011. This was when we visited the Grand Ole Opry. 2 more layouts when we were in Nashville. This was a challenge in Nick Howard's Dimensional Details workshop to use a tone-on-tone. So I spelled out words like country music, Dolly Parton, those type of things. This layout is actually a connections layout because it connects this time, our trip in Nashville, this picture of me standing in front of a picture of Minnie Pearl, with a story from high school. I took a drama class in high school and I actually did a monologue as Minnie Pearl. So the journaling here talks about me remembering that time during my high school years. So this layout could actually have gone in my early years album, but I think it fits perfectly here because this kind of reminded me of that time. So I told the story here of that time in high school. One last layout. While we were in Nashville, we also got to see one of the original General Lees from the Dukes and Hazzard TV show while we were there, and this was based on a sketch challenge, a sketch from a challenge blog, probably back in 2010. And then we were back home. A lot was happening in our life, and so I wanted to just document a little bit about our happy home. We actually called it our happy home because we painted all of the walls inside the house before we bought it, so there were no white walls and it was just a very happy house. This, I believe, was based on a Chamel prompt to journal. I actually wrote a little poem about our house there. I mentioned a lot of things were happening in our life, and I created this 2-page layout recently, realizing that this story was not told. We actually moved from East Texas, you can see us packing here, up to the Dallas area. And I have a picture of our old house and our new house, the old dining room, the new dining room. Robbie had gotten a new job, so I included a business card from his old job and the new job at that time. And also Easter happened in here, and it snowed during one of the days we were moving. I had this layout in mind and was really struggling with how to put it all together because it's a lot of random stuff. And Tammy, who blogs at yourmemoryconnection.com, had a post about different journal boxes. I think it was a Project Life post maybe, and it just inspired me to use all these different journal boxes and just put it all together to get this story told. Right after we moved back to Dallas, a very dear friend of ours up here in the Dallas area had her 60th birthday party. Her daughter created this invitation, and I loved the way that it looked. And so I actually just used that piece of memorabilia as the basis for this particular layout and just added the group photo from that party. Then we went down, at this time then my family was now 5.5 hours away, and so we went back down because it was my niece Nicole's graduation from high school. So this is just her high school portrait, and then I did a 2-page layout based on a sketch, again in the Double Take workshop. You can see that I slit the page protector so you can actually look at the invitation here. And I created a pocket to put the program in on this side. So the original sketch didn't have the pocket, but I knew I wanted to include that, and it makes a nice title block. Actually, this layout is backwards. The sketch was the other way around, but when I put this page in and slit the page protector, I realized I had done that wrong, and again, I'm all for embracing imperfection, and I just put them in like this. It's fine with me, and you probably would not have known that if I hadn't told you. We also, while we were down there, had a birthday party for my niece who turned 18. This was based on a sketch by Lisa Day. And then we came home to Dallas, and Pumpkin came with us for her summer visit. My niece Pumpkin, her name is actually Natasha. And I had one layout scrapped from that visit, but when I went back through 2007, I realized I didn't just have a layout incorporating the whole visit with the dates of her visit. So I created this layout based on a sketch by Cyan, and I hope I'm saying that right, Cyan. If I'm not, you can just be sure and tell me. She blogs at fromhighintthesky.blogspot.com. I love this. Again, I included a piece of memorabilia. This is a note that my niece wrote with a picture of me watching her ride her bicycle. Included just a couple of square photos, that things we did. We planted some flowers and went to the park. So I just love the way this came out. And then this is the layout that I had scrapped previously about a special lunch that we went to together. Now, while Pumpkin was here, we actually drove back to Dallas, and the next day we put Robbie on a plane. He had to go on a business trip to Moscow and London. Did I mention already that this was the year of travel for us? It really was. So one of the things that Shamel recommended in her cover-to-cover class, when you went through your albums, to look and see, did you have different perspectives? Now right here, obviously I have a little bit of Pumpkin's perspective in the book, but since Robbie was gone on this trip, I wanted something from him. He only took a few photos, and I gave him 2 index cards and asked him if he would please just write a small blurb about being in Moscow and London. And then I just put together this little 6x12 page to include some of his perspective, just a couple of the photos that he took while he was away. When he returned home, I had planned a special event for us so that we could go to this Star Wars exhibit, and I journaled here about how difficult it was for us to be apart while he was overseas, and then just a little bit about what I had planned. Then I did a 2-page layout actually showcasing photos from the exhibit, the Star Wars exhibit that we went to see. And here I used some memorabilia. This was the brochure that I used as a title block about the exhibit, and this little piece here is from the newspaper. I actually clipped this out the first time I saw it in the newspaper as a reminder that I wanted to plan us a trip to go see this, so I used those pieces of memorabilia. Then we were into the summer in July, my birthday. This layout was actually based on a sketch, probably created this a couple of years ago. I realized as I was going through 2007 that I did not scrap about a weekend that we took at one of our very favorite bed and breakfast. The owner of the bed and breakfast had actually given us a certificate for a free weekend because we had both graduated from college in 2006 and went that summer, and I asked her if we could keep the certificate so I could scrapbook it, of course. And so I took that as my color scheme and just used that in this layout with a photo of us actually at the bed and breakfast. And then the last layout in Volume 1 of 2007 was a banquet. I was the co-chair of this banquet for an organization called Christ for India. I actually served on their board of directors also. This page was inspired by a Shamel class, I think the Pretty Paper class if I remember correctly. Now you'll notice this banquet was in mid-September. So this is Volume 1 of 2007, and it doesn't necessarily end on June the 30th, which would have been the middle of the year. I just divide my layouts in half, and this is where it happened to end, was in the middle of September. I hope you've enjoyed a look at my 2007 Our Wonderful Life Volume 1 album. Thanks so much for watching.